hopeful. I am hopeful that this partnership will move forward and continue to keep us all up to date. There's so much going on. As we get older, it seems like we have more decisions to make that we thought we'd already made, and that's not true. So Corey, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you very much. Corey is the CEO and president of his company that deals exclusively with long-term care. From what I understand, Corey, if I'm wrong, you are welcome to correct me. But we welcome you to Central DeKalb Senior Center. And when the world's a better place and we're in the building, we'd like to have you in the great room to meet our folks face to face. But thank you very much, Corey, for showing up today and bringing us this information.
Hey, great to be here, Victoria. Thanks so much. So do I have control of the screen now?
You do, yes.
Okay, all right. So I will attempt in my advanced age to share my presentation. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. All right. Money pays for it. Health buys it. Money pays for it. Health buys it. Over 40 years ago, two people very close to me sat with their financial team and they talked about what they wanted to do with their money. The man at the time was a very successful dentist in a small town in southern Minnesota, and his wife was a teacher. Not unlike a lot of men, he dismissed this idea of long-term care and he said, I'm never going to need this. I eat bacon every day. I'm an Iowa farm boy. I can take my dock out by myself. And they did nothing. The next year, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and they found out that, yeah, your money does pay for it, but what actually buys it is your health. You fast forward 18 years, and he had to help her with those personal activities of daily living, those being eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring continence, and their relationship changed, unfortunately, for the worse. In 1998, he sold his dental practice. He did all the things he threatened to do for the next 8 years while putting 3 kids through school and taking care of her. In November of 2006, he calls me at the office and he says, I have some news. And I said, what's that? He said, I have stage 4 esophageal cancer. And my dad died on Father's Day of 2007. Never did I think for 1 second that my mom would outlive my dad. And she lived 10 more years. And at a cost of about $70,000 per year. The reason we're here today, the reason I've been doing this since 2001 is a lot of people they just don't understand this. They don't get their questions answered. The long-term care education, we think it's for everybody. The planning, that might be another matter. That may not be for everybody, but certainly everybody here needs to get their questions answered. And, that's what we want to do today. This is my family. This picture was taken in October of 2004. I have an older sister and a younger brother. And, we just didn't think that mom would outlive dad. I know I've said that before already. And it kind of plays into this thing where a lot of people think, oh, my family didn't think the long-term care issue would happen to them. And they were wrong. And so one of the things that we had to deal with after my father died was, okay, well, how can we help mom now? And, when my dad was at the end of his life, they were in southern Minnesota and I live in Atlanta. My brother and sister live in the Minneapolis area, and my mom couldn't drive and she couldn't clear the snow and she couldn't cut the grass. And it's not that she wouldn't do these things. Physically, she was unable. So if you're in the same city and you have to help a loved one, it can be very difficult to arrange the caregivers and the time and all this. But if you throw in that curveball of geography, and in our case, it was really pronounced because, Atlanta is a flight and a 2-hour drive away from where we grew up. My brother and sister are 2.5 to 2 hours away. And they had families and jobs and everything else. And so there's just multiple factors here that can really make things difficult. And I think the other side of this, when I was trying to help my dad at the end of his life, I really didn't know what came next. And I think if you have a plan, you have somebody that can anticipate and knows the questions and can probably be of more service than a family member or, a neighbor or something like that. So, after my dad died, my mom moved into an assisted living, and, she couldn't stay in the home because she couldn't drive a car. She couldn't go to and from the grocery store and so on. And so, with my mom's case, her disease was less pronounced than it is in other folks that get MS. And so one of the great regrets my dad had was that he didn't get to meet his first grandson, Jackson, here. And Jackson was born 10 days after my dad died on June 27th of 2007. And I say that because my sister had 2 girls, which my dad and I excelled at winding up and giving them back to my sister. And he just really wanted to be alive to meet his first grandson, and he just wasn't able to do that. I bring this up because I'm sitting at home in February of 2009, and my mom called me and was very frantic and had said, you're never going to believe this, but they found a softball-sized cancerous tumor on Jackson's lungs, and the kid was 19 months old at the time. And I remember thinking, well, surely this does happen to little kids, but it's all the more direct when it affects you. And so he was very sick. He had 10 or 12 rounds of chemo, 10 or 12 rounds of surgery. I don't know how many times I flew to Minneapolis with a black suit on late notice. And, sometimes miracles come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And this kid decided he wasn't going anywhere. And so he lived. And I can't explain it. The doctors can't explain it. I think it's a lot of want to. But I think, with long-term care, I think we as a nation have been lulled into this false sense of security is that this is just an old person's issue. And I look at our circumstances, and certainly I hope that this never happens to anybody else. But people always want to know what their chances are. And I look at my family, and it's pretty much 0 or 100%. So I think with this picture, as you get to know me, hopefully there's a story here. And my brother and sister-in-law lived out in the country. And my brother said, for Jackson's 5th birthday, we don't really want to make a big deal out of this. He'd been about a year cancer-free thereabouts. And my brother specifically said to me, I really don't want him to have any vehicles or anything because he's a pretty crafty little kid. And, we kind of live out in the country, and it would be easy for him to, slip out of sight and so on. And, I never said I wouldn't do it. So I went to the Toys R Us, and I remember corralling these little kids and saying, hey, if you had a really cool uncle like me and it was your birthday, what would they get you? And they all point to this thing. It seemed logical to me. And I said, okay, well, that sounds good. And so I told the cashier lady, I said, gee, I'd like that. And so I'm up, at the cashier's desk, and I'm paying, and up comes these 2 huge boxes. And I kind of laughed offhandedly and said, what's that? And she very seriously said, oh, that's your dune buggy. And then she follows that up by saying, and some assembly is required. And I said, yeah, this is where the word some is very subjective. So now I got another problem. I got to be at a birthday party in a day, and I got to put this thing together. I'm not very good mechanically. So I go back to the hotel, and the night manager says to me, 100%, he says, what's that? And I said, it's my nephew's dune buggy. And he said, and I do quote, I'd really like to put that together. And I said, you know what? That makes 2 of us. It's the best $50 I've ever spent. It never would have looked like that had I put it together. And so we go to the birthday party, and I figure I needed to probably give this to him as the last gift in case I had to make a quick exit. And so came time to give Jack his gift. He really liked it. And my brother from across the yard says, well, we talked about this. And I said, no, not really. You talked about this. I never said I wouldn't do it. And so anyway, he got much joy out of that. And I just kind of figured, you tell a little kid to beat cancer that he can't have it. So, this issue, this doesn't discriminate. The long-term care issue, it doesn't just affect old people, it affects people of all ages. And that's kind of one of the myths that's out there is that, hey, I'm going to be 58 in May. And, I look at 58 a little bit differently than I did when I was 20, but it could affect anybody at any time. And so we find that, a lot of people that have been through it, they already understand a lot of this stuff because they realize nothing pays for it. They realize the strain they can put on families. And, we like to ask people, hey, what's your family story involving long-term care? We like to make this interactive. So I'd like to open it up to the group. And has anybody had a prior experience with long-term care? Donna?
Yeah, I had long-term, about 12 years ago, I had a stroke and I had already bought long-term care from Emory or their vendor. And so I had it, and I had it for a bunch of years. I was at Atria Buckhead, and now I don't have long-term care, and now I can't get it. So I just want to listen and all that kind of stuff. It's expensive.
There's a lot of different ways to create assistance with this. The health is the most cost-effective way to get it is, as my family found out, is you have to have your health. If you don't have your health, there are other ways to do it, but it's not as cost-effective. But Thank you for sharing, Donna. Anybody else care to add? Okay. We find that in helping people, really the most powerful predictor if anybody does anything about this is if they've had a prior experience, because they already know a lot of the things that we're going to discuss. And so it brings me
Sorry, is that us?
Yeah, he's frozen.
Just be patient, everybody. We're going to get this fixed. Is anybody surprised there's any technology issues ever over the past 2 years?
Are we good to go, Victoria?
Yes, we are good.
Yes, we're good. Go right ahead. I don't know what happened, but now we're good. Thank you.
It happens, but when I was putting together this workshop, I thought, well, why don't people do anything about this? And in 20 plus years of doing this solely, if people haven't been through it, it might be difficult to see the value in going through this process and doing the planning. The other side of this too is that people don't a lot of times understand the role that health insurance plays versus long-term care. Your health insurance is designed to help you get better. And it's going to be delivered by somebody with a lot of training, a medical professional, a physical therapist, a medical doctor, a registered nurse. And long-term care, like in my mom's circumstance, hey, she wasn't going to get better. So long-term care would have made her more comfortable. So think of long-term care and health insurance like bookends. One helps you when you're getting better. It's delivered by somebody with a lot of training, and the other one helps you when you're not getting better, and they're just trying to make you more comfortable. Many don't realize the role that health insurance plays in securing long-term care either. And, that's, people don't realize you have to be healthy enough to get it. And that's kind of where our family got surprised with my mother. And that's why we have the phrase, money pays for it, health buys it. People can gear their plan according to a budget that they have per month or per quarter or per year. This is not a one size fits all thing. The other reason that people don't plan for this is that it is like anything else, it's a very intricate business, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And if you deal with people that don't do this every day, you get what you get. You deal with somebody that is a specialist, you're probably going to be in a position to get a better outcome. So people don't often realize that they can customize their plans according to a specific budget or whatever needs they have. Now, assuming somebody is healthy and, carriers look at 10-year medical history, they look at 10-year surgical history, medications that the client has taken. And so if the client is clean, they're going to have a lot of options. And then they make basically 4 decisions. One is, well, what kind of a daily benefit do I buy? You can buy between $50 and $500 a day of coverage. And so in order to understand that, there's a link that I can send everybody from Genworth that talks about the cost of care, talks about the cost of home care, adult daycare, assisted living, and the nursing home. And the insurance provides a stream of income to get care in the venue the clients choose. That's up to the client where they go. So the daily benefit is one choice. The benefit period, which is how long does the carrier pay, that's another choice. It could be a couple of years all the way up to unlimited. And inflation is a really important consideration as well, because when you buy 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5% compound inflation, it helps you maintain your buying power. And it helps you keep up with the cost of care. And finally, there's the other metric is the elimination period. That's kind of a fancy way of saying deductible. It's how many days does a carrier pay? How many days does a client pay before the carrier pays? Finally, there's this issue of carrier bad press. And, the life insurance industry has been around for hundreds of years. Long-term care has been around since 1974. They don't have the experience that the life insurance carriers do. If a life insurance policy is sold this morning, the actuaries understand the numbers and they know the likelihood of them paying in year 1, year 2, year 3, and so on. So when General Electric started this in 1974, they had to make several assumptions that were unknowable. One is, well, if we sell 100 policies, what percentage of those are going to pay for a period of time and then not pay? And it's what they call lapse. And they thought that it might be 6.5% to 7%. And what they ended up getting was 1.5%. Put a percentage of premiums away each month for reserves. And if they think that they're going to get a certain interest rate on the reserves and they get something less than that, that's a mistake also. Finally, they thought that, if a lady needed long-term care, it might be a couple of years. The number was actually more than 3 years. They thought that if a man needed care, it might be a year and a half, and it actually ended up being more. So they were off on all 3 of these things. In the year 2000, the carriers got together and they said, hey, we got to get these numbers right. And so now the numbers their premiums are priced with the 1.5% lapse rate, with more up-to-date information. They're priced with better interest rate assumptions, and they're priced with better claims assumptions. But I think, what's left out, and a lot of times when people talk about this, is the experience of long-term care and how, like a great coach, they made the halftime adjustments to price their product more appropriately. So with today, because this is such an intricate subject, we're basically going to cover three things. What is long-term care? What's the cost? And who or what pays for it? And, this is meant to start a dialogue. So long-term care is, it's the kind of help that we might need as a result of prolonged illness or disability. It could be that we're dealing with the effects of having lived a long life. The way that a client collects benefits for long-term care is that there's two ways. One is if they cannot perform 2 out of the 6 ADLs, activities of daily living, those being eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring continence, their medical professional writes what's called a 90-day certification letter, says, hey, my patient, can no longer eat or bathe. He or she is not going to get better for the next 90 days. Please begin the claims process. The other way that a client could collect benefits is if they have cognitive impairment. And there's really 4 subcomponents of that. One is orientation as to person, place, or time. 2 is deductive or abstract reasoning. 3 is judgment as it relates to safety awareness. Or 4 is memory matters. And many times a determination can be made by looking at client medical records or giving the client a standardized test, but it's either or. And if a client's medical professional thinks they're on claim, it's over. The carrier doesn't really get a say. And another myth out there is I've heard people say for years that, well, I know the carriers can deny claims. Well, if the client's medical professional doesn't think it's a claim, there's nothing that the carrier or I can do or whoever helped them can do. But there's 2 ways to access the benefits. And then when that's done, the carrier is going to say, where do we send the money to? Another myth out there is that, the carrier dictates where the client goes. It's completely false. That's up to the family and the individual. In my experience, what I've seen is people want to stay home as long as they can. But sometimes they need more assistance, and so they have to go to assisted living or the nursing home because they need more care. So we talked about the triggers, and this is completely up to the client medical professional. And we talked a little bit about the difference between health insurance and long-term care. And health insurance uses skilled care. Long-term care uses non-skilled care. Their terms, not mine. Both very, very important, but skilled care serves very different needs when you compare it to non-skilled care. So the costs, the cost of care in the Atlanta area, it's $20 to $25 an hour roughly for home care. It can be $4,000 to $5,000 a month for assisted living, and it can be $7,000 to $8,000 a month for the nursing home. Many don't realize, like my family, that nothing pays for it. I mean, the family pays for it, and so the $700,000 that we paid for my mother in the 10 years that she was living, and she lived 10 more years after my dad died. And the costs for her care were $70,000 a year. And so I had my mom and dad, written a check for my mom for $3,000 or $4,000 and paid 1 or 2 years, that $700,000 would have been a carrier's problem and not ours. But I'm probably not telling you anything here that you don't know. And that is if you have to be a caregiver, it can adversely affect your life. It can make you, sick as well. And so it's oftentimes it's not talked about, well, gee, what are the effects on the caregivers? And so there's I've got a slide here that talks about the cost of care. And this is, Genworth is a fantastic company. Can everybody see this? Can everybody see the Genworth cost of care site? Yes.
I can see it. I assume everybody else can.
Okay. So this tool is free, and it's one of the best things in the industry. Genworth is an insurance company. They built this. They've studied 6 or 8 or 10 cities in every state in the union. They can tell you what the numbers are on an hourly, daily, or monthly or annual basis. I I just picked Atlanta and just, these are some average costs. Home care is about $4,000 a month. Assisted living, the rental component is about $4,000 a month. And then of course, the product, the venue most commonly associated with long-term care is the nursing home. And, we can get a private room or a semi-private room, but many don't understand what these numbers are. And this is free. So you can go to this site. It's a tremendous resource. They study 6 or 8 or 10 cities in every state in the United States. It's extremely well done. And then you can kind of get an idea of what the costs of care are there on that. That's a very helpful tool. Happy to share that if you want to see that. So, people want to know, well, who or what pays for it? Well, nothing pays for it. Health insurance doesn't pay, Medicare doesn't pay, and the government doesn't step in until you meet the state minimum income and asset levels as set forth by the state. So, this is what we found out, and certainly people need to be aware of that. And so, people may be saying, well, gee, what is the benefit of doing something about this? And one of the, I jumped the gun here. One of the things that we have to balance the insurability component, and again, that's where my family got caught, is it's one variable. Hey, if somebody wants to wait, what's their insurability going to be? If nothing happens, then that might work out just fine. So the insurability is a variable to be managed. There's something called market forces, and that is, hey, we know what the products are right now. I don't know what they're going to be in 5 years or 10 years. Many people don't want to do the planning now. They want to wait. And obviously that's up to them. But there are risks with waiting, one of which is, we can be insurable one day and not insurable the next. Market forces is kind of what the product availability is now. Tax benefit, there might be some tax favorability depending upon how the client files their taxes and what kind of product they get. But there's a cost of waiting too, because many people in their 50s will say, well, I'll buy this in 10 years. Well, if somebody that's 50 years of age has a 33-year life expectancy, they will actually pay more premium from age 60 to age 83 because there's a 2 to 3% premium difference between each year and age. So that's something that we know as the cost of waiting. And part of what may help people is that people don't often realize that they can share in the risk. They don't got to give it all away. They don't got to take it all on, or they can build a plan that's custom made just for them, for their circumstances. So many that haven't had the experience with long-term care, they want to know, well, what role does long-term care play in my financial plan? And we've always said, hey, people have their asset, income, and family portfolios, and they take these protectionary actions, like, your home, you have homeowners insurance, your health, you might have health insurance, your income, you might have disability, your family, you might have life insurance, if you have wealth, you might have more life insurance, but your 401k, your IRAs, that's what long-term care is there to protect, because that's what's going to fund a long-term care expense if somebody doesn't have the coverage and they need the care. So there is, part of what I've done is I've been involved in training advisors since 2003, and I've trained over 4,000 advisors from San Francisco to Wall Street, how to talk to people about this and how to help them. And, this is one item that we came up with, to add value to folks. There's really two ways to approach this. On an individual, with an individual aspect, with an employer, one of the main advantages is they can add this benefit and they don't have to pay anything for it. A lot of employers that we talk to, they want to know, well, what is it going to cost? Well, if one of the first conversations doesn't involve the Genworth cost of care site, it might make they should do. So employers can add this as a completely voluntary benefit. They can pay all the premium if they want, but they're not obligated to, or they can pay some of the premium. So the advantage is there can be less underwriting in an employer, and there's a directed awareness campaign that will help people figure out what to do. On the individual side of things, you have to go through full underwriting. And as we discussed, we have to look at 10-year medical history, 10-year surgical history, and what medications the client has taken or has taken. And if the client doesn't have any history, they're going to have a lot of options. If they do have history, the options can be more limited in nature. So this is a story that we run into this frequently, where couples, have been together and they've done well financially and they're helping their family. And then, like my family, this issue happens to them. And then they wonder, well, what's going to pay for this? And so what our family found out is, well, because my mom and dad didn't allocate anything from my mom's care, everything was available to pay for the care. And so that's sometimes a harsh surprise that people, run into. And so what happens is many times, in this case, this lady was going to do all the care herself, and maybe she didn't have the training, and she was concerned maybe about the money and so on. And she suffers as a result. And that's anybody that's given care can probably comment on that. But she finds out that nothing pays for this, and that pretty much everything is available to pay for care, as opposed to just a premium and a carrier. And many times we find out that when the family starts to deliver care, that a lot of times things begin to unravel. And so people always want to know, well, what are my chances? And we try not to talk about people's chances. I mean, you see people say, there's some dialogue that says 65%, 1 and 2. And what we do is we help people to agree to 3 things. One is, and this is predicated on people being reasonable. Agreement number 1 is, hey, do you think you'll live a long life? And this is predicated on people being reasonable. And, when people consider their family history, how long their mom and dad lived, how long their siblings lived, aunts and uncles, and, they look at how they're taking care of themselves, and if they're going to the doctor, if they're, they're, eating this and not that, and taking the stairs as opposed to the elevator, and they're taking care of themselves. I mean, number 1 can sometimes be an afterthought. And so agreement number 2 is, if you live long enough, is it reasonable to say that you might need some help at some point? And, these agreements were geared to help people and not to create areas of debate, because the second that I say there's a 1 and 2 chance, the person is probably going to point at me and say it's going to be you and not me. And so then you're debating, and then nobody gets helped. The third agreement is, if the long-term care issue and its associated challenges present itself to you, you realize that it's not about you, because your life doesn't end. It doesn't change. Someone else's does. And it's about the emotional and physical distraught that gets brought onto that person. And there's a secondary set of consequences, and that's financial. Somebody has to pay for it. The money has to come from somewhere. So again, we try to talk to people. Our standard is we talk to people the way that I'd expect people to talk to my mom and dad if they're still living. So when you build a plan, you can build it individually. we talked a little bit about this, but with the daily benefit amount, you can buy between $50 and $500 a day. And you probably need to look at the Genworth website to look at what the cost of care is for the area that you're living in now or the area that you might be living in when you need care. Incredibly helpful, and it's free. The benefit period is, hey, if the carrier pays, how many years do they pay? Do they pay 2 years all the way up to unlimited? The elimination period is another way of expressing deductible. It's how many days the client pays versus before the carrier pays. And of course, inflation helps the client maintain their buying power. And the most popular options are 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5% compound inflation. So there's a great deal of flexibility when a client wants to build a plan. Everything is built individually, or can be. I hear a lot of people, we've been doing this now full time since 2001. We don't do any other business. And we've had a lot of people come to us and say, well, I know I can't get it. I've been declined. Well, that may not necessarily be true. We've got a very detailed process that we follow to try to help people, to try to set the expectations with the marketplace and the carrier. And so we've had people in many instances over the last 21 years that have been declined twice that come to us, and we ended up helping them. So part of the advantage there is our experience, but also understanding what carriers are more uncomfortable with certain sets of circumstances than the others. So we've had a lot of experience helping people that have health problems, that have been told they can't get it. And so we have a very detailed process that helps figure out, where we can actually help people. We actually had a case recently where the client was declined twice by the same doctor for different reasons. And turns out that the doctor's office had mixed up her medical records with another patient of theirs. And because of my experience with pharmaceuticals and selling implantable medical devices, I was able to negotiate between underwriting and the doctor's office, adjustments to the notes that were acceptable to all concerned. So your health is a primary driver here, but just because a client has been declined once doesn't necessarily mean they can't get it. So it's been a pleasure here today talking to you. We have some materials that you might find useful, but hey, I'll throw it out to questions now and see if I can help or assist further. Any questions?
Corey, this is Victoria. First of all, I do encourage you guys to take a minute and think of something you may want to ask Corey. But the other thing too, if you have any handouts, you can send me as an attachment, then I can forward them on to the people who attended today and have them, because I know there were a couple of people who wanted to come and could not come, and I can just give those to them as well. But
yeah, anybody, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead, Victoria.
No, I was just going to say, I really appreciate what you were saying. And I do think it's interesting because I hear from a lot of people, oh, I wish I'd gotten long-term health years ago or whatever, and it's too late for me now. But I think to hear that there is some possibility to still be able to get long-term care and have it not really take every penny you've got. So I do appreciate that.
There's a great deal of flexibility when building a plan. And, there's a couple of determining factors there. The age, can't do anything about that. There can be a 2 to 3% premium difference between each year and age. What kind of a plan a client wants. Not everybody wants to drive the Cadillac. Some, want to drive a Chevy S10, with 500,000 miles on it. So there's great flexibility with how the plans can be set up. But, at the beginning of all this is, education. You have to know what this is, and you have to know, maybe more importantly, what it isn't, so you can do what's best for you, whatever that is. And, certainly, we've we've been at this a long time, and and our goal is to just answer people's questions and help them.
I appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions? Or can they email you afterwards with some questions? Because I have
Absolutely. Yeah, they absolutely can. And I think one of the things that we can do is we could set up separate Zoom meetings, one-on-one. So, if they have questions, they can get their questions answered with no obligation. That's a service that we always provide after we do these workshops.
Okay. I think sometimes, I know Keith and I've talked about, it's hard for sometimes people to ask questions with others around. So if anybody's got a question, go ahead. If not, I have a feeling that Corey will be glad to. All right, go ahead.
Corey, I was wondering, I don't know how it exactly works, but I'm guessing maybe they have to do a physical or gather a lot of your medical history, current status to determine your risk, to determine something. Am I right on that? I don't know.
I talk generally about it, but what happens is this. Let's say that client wants to pursue long-term care, okay? Whoever is helping them has to have complete command of their medical history. And here's why. Understand, okay, well, where am I going to take this client that has this certain history or that certain history? So we have about a 10 or 12 page client intake form that asks the questions that carriers want to know the answers to. And the reason for that is we want to help people. And we're not helping them if we take them to a carrier that isn't comfortable with their history. Now, if there's no history, there will be a lot of options. If there's history, the options will be more limited. But to your point, there's really, after whoever helps you needs to tell you what your options are based on your medical history. Okay, that's number one. You got to know what your options are because every carrier is priced a little bit differently. Okay. Second, they have to price in a way, you have to figure out what you're solving for. You see the plans that you have access to underwriting wise, and you say, hey, what's the best value for me? What's the best direction to go? Okay, so you pick your carrier. Then you go through formal underwriting. Okay, formal underwriting will take about 6 weeks, and they're going to look at the application. Okay, which will be, in our case, a review and a victory lap of the client intake form because we already asked all the questions because we don't want to start helping somebody until we know that we can help them. But the carrier is going to pull medical records. It's what we call in the industry an APS, attending physician statement, because they want to verify what they're taking on. So they will likely order medical records. That is a common step. Another common step is, excuse me, a phone interview. That's a common step, and it takes about 45 minutes. And what happens is this. At the beginning of the conversation, they'll throw out 7 to 12 different items. In the middle of the conversation, they're going to ask what's in your medical history or what's in your application. So whoever helps you needs to give you a copy of your intake form. They need to give you a copy of the application, so it's an open book test. And at the end of the phone interview, they're going to say, well, what did we talk about at the beginning? Because they're wanting to test the memory. So the attending physician statement, that's a common underwriting step in the formal process with the carrier. The phone interview is a common step. And then they might do what's called a paramed, which is they might send a nurse to the client's home to take blood and urine and vitals and to ask them some questions. Those are 3 very, very common steps. Sometimes it's just a phone interview. If the application is clean, sometimes it's all 3. But the process takes a minimum of 6 weeks to get formally underwritten. And, clients this is also not necessarily known. A lot of times after underwriting is done, clients, they maybe want more coverage because they've had time to think about it, or they maybe want less coverage. All of that is negotiable if you can get the coverage in the first place. And whoever helps you needs to do that for you. So, you have to have some idea what it can cost before you go through formal underwriting, because you have to know what the numbers are and how you want to pay. But after underwriting is done, if you get the outcome you want, maybe you could get more coverage or less coverage, or maybe you want to adjust your coverage according to a certain premium, all of which is fine. Have I answered your question? I thank you for bringing that up, because the formal underwriting process is, it takes a minimum of 6 weeks. There could be 2 or 3 normal steps, but whoever helps needs to make sure that they can help the client before they start going down a path of recommending a carrier to formally apply to.
Oh, that's very helpful. But Corey, I have one other question. When listening to
Okay.
you, I thought, what if I have a plan, but then something changes, I move? Is that factored in, or does that not matter at all?
It doesn't really matter, in the United States, Karen, because what does matter is, if you look at the general cost of care side, the plans are going to work anywhere in the United States. Okay. In Atlanta, we build plans on an average about $200 a day, $6,000 a month, thereabouts. Okay. In New York, that's about half of what you would need. So your plan would work. If a client had a $200 a day plan in Georgia, it would work really well. It would work in New York, it just wouldn't work as well.
Okay.
So the plans will work anywhere in the United States, but how well they work will be directly proportional to how much time and thought was given setting them up. Have I answered your question? Does that answer your question?
Oh. Yes, it did, Corey. It answered my question. I appreciate it. Very thoughtful.
Well, the other thing that's really important is if you have a plan, okay, have a review. Okay, make sure you understand what it is. Make sure you understand how it's going to execute and how it's going to work. And anybody should be able to do that to you with no obligation, because you have to understand how it's going to execute. If you ever need to access it, you have to know who to call and what to expect. And in many cases, when we do that, the client finds that their coverage is very well set up, or maybe they need to make some adjustments. And if they have their health, anything is possible, of course. But we recommend, if you have a plan, getting it reviewed so you're clear on what the coverage is.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Corey. That was easy to understand, and it felt like a good, thorough walkthrough.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anybody else? I'll send over a white paper that we did recently that kind of boils this down. And I'll send a link to my calendar that includes a Zoom meeting if you want to do that and talk further. Happy to help you get to wherever you got to get to on this.
Well, thank you, Corey, ever so much. I appreciate all the information. I know I was sitting here working and listening at the same time, and now I've got a few ideas that I may share with you later. But thank you ever so much. And you had a very good turnout, and I was pleased about that, particularly since this is your first time. And so thank you very much. We look forward to working with you in the future. And for anybody on the call, we'll have the link later and his handouts for you if you're interested. And we can also share them with others who did not get to attend today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Corey. Everybody stay safe. Karen's up next with her wonderful program on her trips for around the United States and Jamaica. So hopefully I'll see you then. Anybody else?
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Victoria.
You're so welcome. So nice to meet you.
Thanks, Corey.
Everybody have a great day.
Corey.
Stay well.